They call us ghosts. Desert specters in black armor, moving with the wind and striking with the certainty of death. To raiders, we're nightmares. To settlers, we're salvation. To the Republic, we're symbols. Proof that its flag still casts a long shadow across the Mojave and beyond. That's the legend. But legends, they're only half-truths told by those who've never seen the other side of the rifle. My name is Jacob Heller. Though once I put on this armor, most people stopped using it. To the Republic, to the officers, to the propaganda posters plastered across outposts and cities, I became Ranger Heller. A nameless silhouette in a wide-brimmed hat and dark duster, one of many. Replaceable. But before that, before the desert ghosts and the black armor, I was just a farm boy from the Brahmin pastures outside Shady Sands. Dirt under my nails, sweat on my brow, dreams in my head, dreams of something greater than the endless grind of pulling weeds and patching fences. And those dreams, they were fed by stories. I still remember the first time I saw a ranger. I was 12 years old, hauling water with my father when the dust storm rolled over the hills. Out of the red haze, a figure appeared. Tall, imposing, face hidden behind a mask with dark lenses that reflected the sun. A revolver on his hip, a rifle slung across his back. The storm howled around him, but he didn't flinch. He walked straight past us, silent, like he'd stepped out of another world. That image carved itself into me. My father bowed his head as the ranger passed, not out of fear, but reverence. He whispered, "That's a ranger, Jacob. NCR's finest." Men like that keep us safe. From that day on, I wanted nothing else. The posters made it easier to believe. You've seen them. The ones pinned to boards in every outpost, promising glory and honor. A ranger stands tall against the crimson sky, rifle raised, the slogan beneath. The NCR Ranger, always watching, always ready. Those posters weren't just ink and paper. They were fire. Fire that spread through me, through 1,000 boys like me, desperate to matter in a world that had chewed up our fathers and left their bones in the dirt. So when I turned 18, I enlisted. My mother cried, begged me to stay, said the army would chew me up the same way the wasteland chewed everything. My father said nothing. He just looked at me the way he had looked at that ranger years ago. Not proud, not angry, just resigned. He knew I'd already chosen. The day I signed the papers, they told me the truth plain. Not every recruit becomes a ranger. Most don't. Most end up as infantry, boots in the dust, just another number in the NCR's endless war machine. But I didn't care. I would claw my way to the top. I would wear the duster, the armor, the mask. I would become the legend. Because that's what I believed back then. The Rangers were legends. Whispers in the Mojave painted them as invincible. Raiders told stories around their campfires of comrades picked off one by one, shadows moving in the dunes, bullets that came from nowhere. Settlers swore Rangers could track you across days of sand with nothing but a footprint. Even the Legion, Caesar's own killers, cursed their name. I heard they called us the Black Ghosts in their tongue. And I thought to myself, that's who I'll be. That's who I'll become. But what no poster told me, what no recruiter dared to whisper, was the truth hidden beneath the duster. That Rangers aren't born legends. They're forged. hammered down in fire and blood until every part of you that was soft, kind, or human has been burned away. What's left is iron, cold, unbending. I didn't know that then. All I saw were stories of honor. And maybe you're wondering why I'm telling you this now. Why I'm speaking not as a ranger of myth, but as Jacob Heller, a boy who once believed in fairy tales made of bullets and dust. It's because someone has to strip the paint off the posters. Someone has to tell the truth that's hidden behind the black armor and the mirrored lenses. You want to know what it means to be a ranger? What it really means? Then listen. Listen to the story of how I traded my name for a number, my soul for a symbol, my dreams for nightmares. Because the legend is only half the story. And the other half, that's the part they don't print on posters. That's the part I lived. The first thing you need to understand about recruitment is this. They don't ask if you're ready. They don't care if you're ready. The NCR doesn't want you. It wants bodies. Warm bodies it can march into the desert, strap rifles to, and turn into bullets for the Republic's wars. I thought I was prepared. I thought I'd walk in, shake a recruiter's hand, and they'd see the fire in my eyes, the hunger to be something greater. I thought they'd say, "You're Ranger material." What actually happened was less glorious. They herded us into the barracks in shady sands like cattle. A dozen boys and girls, most no older than me, some younger. Gods, there was a kid there who couldn't have been more than 16, lying about his age, trembling as he signed the forms. None of us were Rangers. We weren't even soldiers yet. We were names on rosters, numbers in ledgers. The recruiter, a grizzled sergeant with a scar across his cheek, looked us over like a butcher inspecting cuts of meat. "You're here because the Republic needs you," he barked. "You're not here for glory. You're not here for adventure. You're here because this nation is bleeding, and your blood will patch the wound." That was my welcome speech. They stripped us down, shaved our heads, issued us uniforms that stank of sweat from the last poor bastard who wore them. My clothes, the ones my mother had sewn patches into with shaking hands the night before I left, were tossed into a pile. I remember staring at that pile, at the life I'd left behind, and thinking, this is it. No turning back now. Then came the paperwork. Name, age, next of kin. They asked me if I wanted to be considered for special service, the euphemism for Ranger candidacy. My hand shook as I checked the box. I thought I was signing my path to glory. I didn't realize I was signing my life away. The next weeks were a blur of drills and shouting. We ran until our lungs burned, marched until our feet bled, fired rifles until our shoulders bruised. Every mistake was punished with push-ups, laps, or worse. The drill instructors didn't just break our bodies, they broke our voices too. Every time I tried to speak out of turn, every time I let my thoughts wander back to the farm, they tore it out of me with screams and fists. "Forget your name," one instructor bellowed as I lay gasping in the dirt. "Forget your past. You are not Jacob Heller anymore. You are property of the Republic." And I believed him. God's help me, I believed him. The nights were the hardest. Lying on a cot in the barracks, surrounded by the groans and muffled sobs of recruits too proud to cry out loud. Some prayed, some cursed. I clenched my fists and repeated the same words over and over. I will be a Ranger. I will be a Ranger. Like a prayer, like a curse, like the only thing keeping me from breaking. The instructors dangled the promise of the Rangers in front of us like meat before starving dogs. Prove yourself, they said. Survive basic, show grit, and maybe you'll be considered. That maybe drove us harder than any whip. We fought each other for scraps of recognition. We dragged ourselves through mud, ran obstacle courses until our legs gave out, endured disciplinary exercises that bordered on torture. All for the chance, just the chance, to wear the duster. Some didn't make it. I still remember the boy who lied about his age. One day, he collapsed on the march, his body too small, too weak to endure. The instructors didn't stop. They didn't call a medic. They just stepped over him and barked at the rest of us to keep moving. Later, I saw his cot empty. No one spoke his name again. That was the first lesson of recruitment. You're not people anymore. You're assets. Assets are spent, discarded, replaced. The second lesson came when they put rifles in our hands. Not for practice on targets, no, for executions. A captured raider, beaten and bound, was dragged before us. This man raided NCR caravans, the sergeant said. He stole from the people. He killed loyal citizens. The Republic does not waste bullets on prisoners. They handed the rifle to one of us, a trembling girl named Marta. She tried to refuse. The sergeant backhanded her so hard, she spat blood on the sand. "Pull the trigger, recruit," he ordered. She did. The sound rang in my ears for hours. Each of us got our turn. Each of us pulled the trigger. Some hesitated, some didn't. But by the end, every one of us had blood on our hands. That was the moment I stopped being Jacob Heller, farm boy dreaming of glory. That was the moment I became a tool. Still, I clung to the myth. I told myself, this is what Rangers do. This is what keeps the Republic safe. I pictured the figure in the dust storm, the Ranger who had once seemed immortal to me. I told myself I was walking his path. What I didn't understand was that the path was paved in bones. Recruitment wasn't about teaching us to fight. It was about teaching us to obey, to kill without question, to bury our doubts, to silence the part of us that whispered, "This isn't right." And it worked. By the end of basic, when they called my name as one of the few considered for Ranger candidacy, I felt pride swell in my chest. Pride even after everything. Pride even as Marta's tear-streaked face haunted my nights, even as the boy's empty cot gnawed at my gut. Because that's what the Republic does best. It breaks you down, fills the cracks with its creed, and calls it loyalty. And I was loyal. God help me, I was loyal. Basic training stripped us down to the bone. The training grounds for Ranger candidates took what little flesh we had left and ground it into dust. If you think the Rangers are made in classrooms, in firing ranges, or through lectures on tactics, you're wrong. They're made in the dirt, in the blood, in the endless stretch of desert where you're left with nothing but the will to crawl forward. That's where they decide who will wear the black armor and who will die nameless in the sand. When they called my number, I felt pride. They said I'd been chosen for the next stage, Ranger candidacy. Less than 1 in 20 made it that far. I thought I'd beaten the odds, thought I'd proven myself worthy. What I didn't realize was that I hadn't been rewarded. I'd been condemned. They bussed us to a camp far from shady sands. Just dust, cacti, and the bones of old wars scattered across the ground. The sun beat down during the day, the cold cut into us at night. There were no barracks, no comfort, just tents and the harsh voices of instructors who seemed less like men and more like wolves in uniform. Our lead instructor was Captain Darius Holt, a name whispered with equal parts fear and respect. A man who had survived bitter springs, though no one said the word survived with pride in that context. His face was carved from stone, his eyes sharp as knives. He looked at us the first day and said, "I'm not here to teach you. I'm here to break you. If you're still standing at the end, maybe you'll be Rangers. Most of you won't be standing." And he was right. The training began with the body. We ran miles through the desert with packs heavier than our own weight. When one of us stumbled, we were beaten. When one of us collapsed, they left us behind. If you crawled back to camp, you were fed. If not, you vanished. No one asked where. The drills were constant. Rifles until our shoulders ached, revolvers until the skin of our fingers split. They made us fight each other bare-handed in pits, circling like dogs while the others shouted and jeered. There were no referees. The fight ended when one recruit couldn't rise again. Sometimes that meant broken bones, sometimes worse. The desert itself became our greatest teacher. They'd send us into the dunes with nothing but a canteen and a knife, ordering us to survive for days. No food, no shelter, just sand and the blistering sun. Some recruits returned gaunt but alive. Some didn't return at all. Their canteens would be found days later, half buried, gnawed at by coyotes. The instructors never spoke their names again. And through it all, Holt watched us with eyes like steel, judging, weighing, waiting. But it wasn't just about survival. It was about obedience. They tested it every chance they had. One night they brought out prisoners, raiders they told us. Caught in NCR territory. Maybe they were raiders, maybe they weren't. It didn't matter. We were ordered to execute them. No hesitation, no questions. Just a bullet through the skull. Some of us hesitated. I did. For just a moment, I wondered who the man was, what life he'd lived before the desert chewed him up. Holt saw the hesitation. His fist cracked against my jaw, dropping me to the dirt. "Hesitation gets Rangers killed," he snarled. "Hesitation kills your brothers. Do it, Heller. Do it now." So I did. And the echo of that shot followed me long after the body hit the ground. The worst of it, though, wasn't the physical pain. It was the indoctrination. They tore at our minds as much as our flesh. Every night around the campfire, the instructors drilled the code into us. No mercy for enemies of the Republic. No hesitation in duty. No life more valuable than the mission. They said it so often, it burrowed into my skull, a rhythm that replaced my heartbeat. We repeated it in unison, like a prayer, until it became reflex. Until even in dreams, I could hear myself whispering it. But here's the truth. The code wasn't about making us noble. It was about making us tools. Tools don't ask questions. Tools don't doubt. Tools cut when they're told to cut. We learned to move like shadows. Ambush drills, night raids, silent takedowns. They dressed us in black dusters for the first time during these exercises, not because we'd earned them, but because they wanted us to feel the weight of what we were becoming. The first time I put mine on, I felt invincible. By the end of the night, after watching a fellow recruit disappear during a botched stealth drill, I realized the duster wasn't a symbol of glory. It was a shroud. One by one, the recruits began to change. Marta, the girl who had once cried during basic, hardened into something I barely recognized. Her laughter vanished, replaced by silence. Another boy, Samuel, grew cold and efficient, killing in drills without flinching, without blinking. And me? I learned to bury Jacob Heller, the boy from the farm. I learned to keep his voice locked deep down where Holt couldn't hear it. Still, there were cracks. At night, when the desert grew quiet, we whispered to each other about home, about families, about the people we used to be. It was dangerous. If the instructors caught us, they'd punish us. But we needed it. Those whispers were the only proof that we were still human. And every morning, Holt tore that humanity out of us again. The final test of the training grounds came without warning. One morning, Holt lined us up. Fewer than half remained from the group that had started. He looked us over, his gaze lingering on each face, and said, "Today, you stop being recruits. Today, you prove you're Rangers." They marched us into the desert. Hours, maybe days. I lost track of time. Then, they turned us loose. No food, no water, no maps. Just rifles, knives, and a command. Survive, return to camp. Anyone who wasn't meant to be a Ranger. That trial broke the last of us. I watched Marta die in the dunes, too weak to go on. Her lips cracked, her eyes glassy. Samuel vanished one night, taken by coyotes or raiders, or maybe just the desert itself. I stumbled on, delirious, guided only by the thought that if I stopped, Holt would win. When I crawled back into camp days later, lips bleeding, skin burned raw, Holt was waiting. He didn't smile. He didn't praise me. He just nodded. "You're Ranger material," he said flatly. And in that moment, I realized the truth. He wasn't telling me I'd succeeded. He was telling me I'd been broken enough to be useful. That's how Rangers are made. Not through honor, not through glory, through pain, obedience, and survival. And I was surviving. Training breaks you. But combat remakes you. I learned that the day they pulled me from the camp and dropped me into my first real assignment. No instructors, no drills, no rehearsals. Just the raw, unfiltered truth of the wasteland. They didn't even tell us where we were going. They shoved us into the back of a truck with half a dozen seasoned Rangers, the veterans wearing black dusters faded from years in the sun. Their armor was scratched, dented, scarred. Their faces hidden behind helmets or wide-brimmed hats, eyes lost in shadow. None of them spoke to me. Not at first. I was the recruit, the kid, the one they expected to break. We rumbled for hours across cracked highways and dirt roads. I held my rifle so tightly my knuckles ached. Sweat dripped down my neck. The silence of those veterans weighed heavier than the pack on my back. Finally, the truck slowed. The Ranger beside me, his voice gravel wrapped in steel, spoke for the first time. "Fiends, Outpost Baker. Raiders got the jump on it. We take it back." That was all. No grand speech, no rallying cry, just facts delivered like orders. When the truck stopped, the doors swung open, and heat slammed into me. The air stank of smoke and gunpowder. Outpost Baker was nothing more than a collection of barricades and sandbag walls. But now, it was burning. I saw NCR troopers sprawled in the dirt, blood soaking their uniforms. I saw the fiends, half-naked, tattooed, screaming with chems in their veins, firing wildly from the walls. The veterans didn't hesitate. They moved like water, flowing from cover to cover, rifles cracking with precision. Each shot was a kill. Me? I froze. My boots sank into the dust as the world erupted around me. Bullets whined past. Flames roared. The screams of dying men tore at my ears. My hands shook so hard I thought I'd drop my rifle. A hand grabbed my collar and yanked me down behind a wall. It was the gravel-voiced Ranger. His mask reflected the firelight. Breathe, recruit. Sight picture, trigger squeeze. Don't think, just shoot. Then he was gone, sliding forward into the chaos. I forced myself to lift the rifle. Through the sights, I saw a fiend charging with a machete, blood smeared across his chest. He was grinning, his eyes wide with chems. I pulled the trigger. The shot cracked. The fiend jerked. He fell. That was my first kill. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a hole torn open in my chest. I wanted to vomit, to scream, to run. But there was no time. Another fiend climbed the barricade, shrieking. I fired again, missed, fired again, hit him in the throat. The chaos blurred. The Rangers cut down fiends with surgical precision while I stumbled through the blood and fire, trying not to die. Every shadow was an enemy, every sound a threat. I remember tripping over a corpse, NCR, not fiend, and staring into the dead man's eyes. They looked surprised, as if death had come too soon. When the smoke cleared, Outpost Baker was ours again. The fiends lay in heaps, their screams silenced. The air stank of charred flesh. The NCR dead were dragged into rows, their rifles stacked beside them like headstones. I sat against a wall, hands trembling, rifle across my lap. My uniform was spattered with blood, some mine, most not. My ears rang. My heart refused to slow. The gravel-voiced Ranger crouched beside me. His mask was streaked with soot. "You didn't die," he said. "Not praise, not comfort, just a fact." Then he stood and walked away. That was my welcome into combat. Over the next weeks, it didn't get easier. It just got familiar. Fiends, raiders, rogue ghouls. The Rangers sent us wherever the Republic needed shadows to do its dirty work. Sometimes we fought to defend caravans, sometimes to clear out nests of killers. Always it was the same. Sudden violence, brutal and quick, leaving behind silence and blood. The first time I was hit, it was a fiend with a pistol. Lucky shot. The round grazed my arm, tearing flesh. I screamed, clutching it, certain I was going to die. The Ranger beside me ripped a strip of cloth from his duster, tied it tight, and shoved me forward. "If you can walk, you can fight," he said. So I fought. With blood dripping down my arm, vision swimming, I fought. And when the firefight ended, I was still standing. That was the day I realized the truth. Rangers don't survive because they're better. They survive because they refuse to stop moving. Each mission carved away at me. Each firefight stripped another layer of Jacob Heller, farm boy. Until all that was left was the Ranger. The mask, the duster, the rifle. I started to understand why the veterans never used their names. Names were fragile. Names could die. Numbers, ranks, titles, those could endure. One night, after a raid on a fiend camp, we sat in silence around the embers of a fire. One of the older Rangers, face hidden, said quietly, "The first kill's the hardest. After that, you stop counting." And he was right. I stopped counting. But I didn't stop remembering. Every face I shot, every scream I silenced, every body that fell, they haunted me. In dreams, they stood in rows, eyes empty, mouths open. They didn't accuse me. They didn't need to. Their silence was enough. Still, I told myself it was for the Republic. For the settlers who needed safety, for the caravans that needed protection. I told myself each fiend I killed meant a farmer's child slept safer. Each raider I cut down meant one less widow on the frontier. I had to believe it. Because if I didn't, if it wasn't for something greater, then it was just murder. And I couldn't live with that. Not yet. By the time we rotated back to camp, I wasn't the same. My duster was torn, my hands scarred, my eyes hollow. But I was alive. And in the NCR, in the Rangers, that was enough. The boy who had once dreamed of legends was gone. In his place stood something colder, harder, forged in fire and blood. A Ranger. Every army has rules. March here, fire there, salute when told. But the Rangers have something more. Something heavier than orders. Something deeper than regulations printed on paper. They call it the Code. The instructors had whispered it into us back in training. But it wasn't until I wore the duster, until I marched with veterans, that I truly understood its weight. It wasn't written down anywhere. You wouldn't find it in manuals or slogans on posters. It lived in us, passed from veteran to recruit like a curse you couldn't shake. The first time I heard it spoken out loud was after a firefight near Sloan. Raiders had been hitting the caravans heading out of Vegas, and we'd tracked them to a rocky canyon. The fight was fast, brutal. Rifles cracked in the dust, men screamed, blood spilled across the rocks. When it was over, we stood over the bodies, our breath heaving, guns smoking. One raider still lived, crawling through the dirt with half his guts spilling out. I froze. I didn't know what to do. Part of me thought we should help him, patch him up, maybe drag him back for questioning. That's when one of the older Rangers put a boot on the man's back and pressed his revolver to the skull. "No mercy for enemies of the Republic," he said flatly. Then he pulled the trigger. The words hit me harder than the gunshot. I'd heard them before, whispered around campfires, muttered by instructors. But now I saw them in action. A rule, not of survival, but of principle. The Ranger Code had 3 pillars, drilled into us again and again, until they replaced the blood in our veins. No mercy for enemies of the Republic. No hesitation in duty. No life more valuable than the mission. Simple, cold, absolute. The second time I saw the code in action was during a mission near Searchlight. We were ordered to take out a fiend encampment. In and out, quick and quiet. We crept in at night, our rifles whispering death. But a young woman stumbled out of one of the shacks. Not a fiend, just some settler they'd taken hostage. She ran toward us, sobbing, begging for help. I moved to grab her, to pull her behind cover. But the Ranger beside me shot her clean through the chest. I screamed at him, my voice breaking through the silence we were supposed to keep. "What the hell did you do?" He looked at me, his face hidden behind his mask. "No hesitation in duty," he said. "Noise draws fiends. Mission comes first." The words were ice. The woman's body lay crumpled in the dirt, her sobs silenced forever. And all I could think was, had I just become her executioner too, by standing there and doing nothing? The third pillar came later, and it was the one that cut deepest. It was in the Mojave, during one of the endless skirmishes with Caesar's Legion. We were escorting NCR troopers when the ambush came. Arrows and bullets from the cliffs, Legionnaires charging from the dust with machetes raised. Chaos erupted. One of our Rangers went down, trapped under the weight of 2 Legion fighters. I started forward to help, but our captain's voice cracked like a whip. No life more valuable than the mission. We left him. The mission was to get the troopers through, and so we did. The Ranger screamed until the Legion silenced him. His blood bought their lives, and the code justified it. That's when I realized the truth. The code wasn't honor. It wasn't nobility. It was a cage. A way to strip us of doubt, of hesitation, of humanity. Still, I followed it. What choice did I have? You don't break the code and walk away alive. The veterans lived by it like scripture. They repeated it without thought, as natural as breathing. Around campfires, after missions, when cleaning weapons, the words slipped from their mouths like prayers. Not because they believed, I think, but because they couldn't stop. I tried to believe. Gods, I tried. When I pulled the trigger on captives, when I ignored the cries of innocence, when I left brothers behind to die, I told myself it was for the Republic, for the greater good, for the survival of something bigger than me. But at night, when the mask was off and the silence of the desert pressed in, the code became whispers in my skull. No mercy, no hesitation, mission first. I whispered them back, trying to drown out the memories of the faces I'd seen, the blood on my hands. But the whispers never stopped. One night, I asked the gravel-voiced Ranger, the same one who'd saved me in my first firefight, if the code ever got easier, if the words ever stopped haunting him. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "The code isn't for you. It's for the Republic. You're just the vessel that carries it." Then he walked away. That was the moment I understood what I had become. Not Jacob Heller. Not even a Ranger, really. Just a vessel. A shell carrying 3 cold truths that were heavier than any rifle. The NCR called it honor. The settlers called it protection. The raiders called it death. But to me, it was just chains. Chains I would never escape. By the time the code had sunk its teeth into me, I thought I understood what being a Ranger meant. I thought the worst was behind me. But the wastes are patient teachers. They wait until you think you've learned the lesson before showing you just how little you know. The Rangers are not soldiers in the conventional sense. We're not meant to stand in neat lines and trade volleys like NCR grunts. We are the Republic's knife in the dark, its eyes in the wilderness, its executioners. That means we fight shadows. Our enemies weren't always armies or encampments. Sometimes they were whispers, rumors of raiders gathering in canyons, whispers of fiend chem labs poisoning the wastes, rumors of Legion assassins slipping across the river. We hunted shadows, and in hunting them, we became shadows ourselves. One mission took us deep into fiend territory, west of New Vegas. Reports said a new warlord was uniting the gangs under one banner, promising chems and carnage. The NCR didn't want another frontline battle. They wanted the head cut off the snake before it slithered too far. We moved in at night, black dusters blending with the dark, rifles muffled. I remember crawling through the sand on my belly, the stench of burning jet and psycho in the air. The fiends were too high to notice us slipping through the ruins. We reached the shack where the warlord slept, his laughter spilling through the cracked walls. The captain raised his hand. No words, just a gesture. 2 of us went in. I was one of them. The warlord never woke. One moment he was sprawled on a filthy mattress, arms wrapped around a half-empty jet inhaler. The next, my knife was in his throat. He twitched, gurgled, and was still. I expected triumph. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a hollow silence where something should have been. That was the code working its way deeper. No hesitation, no mercy. Mission first. When the fiends found his body the next morning, they tore each other apart, fighting for scraps of leadership. The Republic called it a victory. But I couldn't stop seeing his eyes in the darkness, wide, confused, then gone. Another mission brought us into contact with the Legion. You want to know what fighting them was like? Imagine trying to wrestle with a storm. They didn't fear death. They didn't retreat. They came at us with machetes and fire in their eyes, chanting Caesar's name until our bullets silenced them. We caught one of their assassins once. A scout meant to slit throats in the night. The NCR wanted him interrogated, but Rangers don't interrogate. That's not our job. We put a bullet in his head, dumped him in a ravine, and moved on. The code said no mercy. The Legion gave none, and so we returned the favor. But it wasn't just enemies we fought. Sometimes, it was the very people we were sworn to protect. I remember one settlement, a caravan hub along the Long 15. Raiders had been hitting supply lines, and the locals were accused of feeding them information. Our orders were clear: investigate, neutralize the threat. We found no proof, just frightened families, poor and desperate. But one ranger claimed he saw a boy slipping out at night, heading toward the canyons. The captain didn't hesitate. He lined the men up in the town square and shot 2 of them as examples. The rest of the settlement fell silent after that. No one dared whisper about raiders again. The NCR called it a secured hub. I called it a graveyard with walls. It was then I realized something that never left me. In hunting shadows, you become one. Civilians saw us not as saviors, but as omens. When a ranger walked into town, whispers spread. Mothers pulled children indoors, men locked their doors, because a ranger's arrival rarely meant salvation. More often, it meant someone would vanish before dawn. And the worst part? We encouraged it. Fear was a weapon, just like rifles and revolvers. If raiders feared us, they hid. If settlers feared us, they obeyed. Fear did what bullets couldn't. But it came at a cost. I remember walking into a town once just to resupply. I took off my mask, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd see me as a man, not a shadow. A child looked up at me, eyes wide, and screamed. His mother yanked him away, muttering prayers. That scream stayed with me longer than the warlord's death gurgle or the assassin's silent fall. Because that was the moment I realized I wasn't Jacob Heller anymore. To them, I wasn't even human. I was the black silhouette from the posters, the ghost in the desert, a thing to be feared. And I carried that fear with me. On patrol, in firefights, in the silence of campfires, I could feel it gnawing at me. The code said it was necessary. The Republic said it was victory. But I wondered, at what point did we stop being protectors and become predators? Every mission blurred the line further. Every shadow we fought left a stain that wouldn't wash away. Yet still, I followed orders. Still, I lived the code. Because that's what Rangers do. That's what the Republic needed. And because I didn't know how to be anything else anymore. The Mojave was supposed to be the Republic's jewel. That's what they told us anyway. They said the desert was rich with trade routes, with water, with energy. They said Hoover Dam was the key to controlling the future, that whoever held it would hold the wasteland itself. And of course, the Republic declared it theirs. But nothing worth taking in this world comes without blood. And the Mojave bled more than most. When I first stepped onto its sands, I thought I'd seen harsh deserts before. I'd trained in the wastes outside shady sands, marched across cracked roads and dry basins. But the Mojave was different. Endless sun, endless sand, endless silence. Heat that pressed down on you like a hand trying to smother. Nights that froze the marrow in your bones. Every mile of it seemed designed to strip the flesh from your body and the hope from your soul. And in that desert waited Caesar's legion. The Republic wanted to expand, to plant its flag over Hoover Dam and call the Mojave its territory. The legion wanted to burn it all to ash and rebuild in the image of Caesar's will. Stuck between them were the people, settlers, traders, tribes, who just wanted to live. But war doesn't ask what people want. War only asks how much they're willing to lose. For the Rangers, the Mojave meant one thing: constant, grinding combat. We weren't there to hold the line. That was for the grunts. The endless rows of NCR infantry sweating in their armor, dying by the dozens. We were there to stalk the desert ahead of them, to bleed the legion before they could strike, to make sure the NCR's shadow stretched further than Caesar's. It began with patrols, days of silence, trudging through sand and rock, eyes always on the horizon. The Mojave played tricks on you. A shimmer in the distance could be heat, or it could be the gleam of a legionnaire's helmet. The wind carried whispers, shifting the dunes so that landmarks vanished overnight. More than once we found skeletons, bleached and half-buried, the remains of patrols who hadn't made it back. Then came the skirmishes. The Legion didn't fight like fiends or raiders. They weren't chaos and madness. They were discipline, order. They moved in formations, chanting in unison, their blades gleaming in the sun. They didn't break when bullets tore into them. They didn't run when their comrades fell. They kept coming, step after step, until either they or we were dead. The first time we clashed, it was in a canyon north of the Colorado. They'd crucified NCR scouts along the ridges, their bodies twisted, arms stretched wide, heads slumped. The sight hit harder than any bullet. It wasn't just death. It was spectacle. A message written in blood and agony. This is what awaits the Republic. We opened fire from the cliffs, rifles cracking, the echoes bouncing like thunder. Legionnaires dropped, but they didn't scatter. They raised shields, advanced in formation, arrows hissing through the air. One ranger beside me took an arrow through the neck. He fell without a sound, blood soaking the sand. Another caught a spear in the gut before we pulled him back. We won that fight, if you can call it winning. The canyon floor was slick with blood, NCR and Legion alike. We dragged the wounded back, left the dead for the crows. The Republic called it a victory in their reports. To me, it felt like a warning. The Legion didn't fear death, and men who don't fear death are the hardest kind to kill. After that, every mission carried weight. Every patrol felt like walking into a trap. The Mojave itself became hostile ground. Settlers whispered of spies everywhere. Caravans were burned. Towns disappeared overnight. More than once, we arrived too late, finding nothing but ashes and crucifixes, the bodies of men, women, and children hanging limp against the sky. Those sights hardened us. Each crucifix was fuel for the code. No mercy for enemies of the Republic. And the Rangers became just as ruthless as the Legion. One night, we caught a band of Legion scouts near Nipton. They were outnumbered, cornered. They dropped their weapons, raised their hands. I thought for a moment, maybe we'd bring them back, interrogate them, trade them for prisoners. But the captain didn't hesitate. He drew his revolver and shot the first in the face. Then, he passed the gun to me. I remembered the code. I remembered the crucifixes. And I pulled the trigger. The Mojave stripped away the last illusions I'd clung to. We weren't heroes fighting villains. We were killers fighting killers. The difference was, in the banner we carried, the longer I fought, the more I felt the weight. Each Ranger was expected to be 10 men, to hold the line against impossible odds. But the truth is, we bled just like anyone else. Every week, another black duster was folded neatly and sent home with nothing inside. The Republic didn't weep. It simply promoted another recruit, handed them a rifle, and told them to keep walking into the fire. And I walked. God's help me, I walked. But the Mojave left scars that never healed. The crucifixes, the screams, the way the sun beat down on us as we dragged ourselves through sand that seemed endless. Each mile felt like it was eating us alive. The Republic wanted the dam. The Legion wanted conquest. And us? We were the ones ground between them, day after day. Until the desert began to claim us too. By the time I'd spent a year in the Mojave, I no longer believed in glory. I no longer believed in the legend of the Rangers. I only believed in survival. And even that felt less like living and more like delaying the inevitable. Because the Mojave didn't just test our strength, it tested our souls. And most of us didn't pass. The posters never show the aftermath. You'll see the Ranger standing tall against the setting sun, dust swirling around his boots, rifle slung proud across his chest. You'll see the slogans, the Republic's finest, always watching, always ready. What you won't see are the cots filled with broken men, the bottles of rot-gut liquor hidden beneath coats, the hollow eyes staring into campfires with nothing left behind them but ghosts. That's the price of glory. By the time I'd survived a year in the Mojave, I'd lost more comrades than I could count, not just to bullets and blades, but to despair. Some Rangers went down fighting, their dusters torn and bloody, their names scribbled into casualty reports that no settler would ever read. Others kept breathing, but something inside them died long before their bodies did. I watched men who had once stalked the desert like predators spend their nights shivering, hands clutching bottles to stop the trembling. I saw women who had faced down Legion warbands alone now staring at the dirt, lips moving silently as if reciting prayers to gods who had long since abandoned us. The Republic called us legends. But the truth? Legends don't limp. Legends don't wake screaming in the night. Legends don't blow their brains out with service revolvers because the crucifixes they saw last week won't leave their minds. We did. One evening after a long patrol, I found Corporal Mendez sitting on a rock overlooking the Colorado. He was older than most, his duster faded to gray, his revolver polished to a shine. He'd been my shadow in more than one firefight, always steady, always silent. That night, he wasn't steady. His hands shook as he loaded his weapon, one round at a time. I asked him what he was doing. "Counting," he said. "Counting what?" He looked at me, eyes bloodshot, a crooked smile on his lips. How many I've killed? I think this'll make it even. Then he raised the revolver to his head. I knocked it away before he pulled the trigger. The gun clattered against the rocks, and he just sat there, shoulders shaking, tears streaking his weathered face. A ranger, a legend, reduced to a sobbing man who couldn't carry the weight anymore. I never told anyone. The next day he was back in formation, mask on, dusters swaying in the wind. No one else saw the cracks, but I did, and I knew they were spreading. The Mojave wasn't just killing us with bullets, it was hollowing us out. Some of us turned to drink, others to chems, some to reckless violence, throwing themselves into fights they couldn't win, as if daring the Legion to finish what the desert had started. I remember one ranger, Davis, charging into a group of legionnaires alone, screaming until they cut him down. He'd been quiet for weeks before that, too quiet. When his body came back, hacked to pieces, the captain called it bravery. I called it surrender. Even those who held themselves together carried the scars. I felt it in myself, the way my hands trembled when I cleaned my rifle, the way I woke up drenched in sweat, the way I stared too long at the horizon, half expecting crucifixes to rise out of the sand. And still, the Republic demanded more. Each mission was another weight, each patrol another nail. The officers in their clean uniforms back in Shady Sands sent us into the fire again and again, writing reports about victories and progress. They never saw the eyes of men dying in the sand. They never smelled the stench of crucified corpses. They never carried the weight of silence after the firefight was over. They called it glory. We called it survival. The settlers saw us differently. To them, we were still legends. When we rode into towns, children pointed, wide-eyed. Men nodded with respect. Women whispered prayers of thanks. They didn't see the bottles hidden in our packs, the tremors in our hands, the nightmares in our eyes. They saw the myth, not the man. And maybe that's why we kept going. Maybe we needed them to believe, even if we didn't anymore. Maybe their awe was the only thing holding us together. But awe doesn't heal wounds. Awe doesn't bring back the dead. Awe doesn't silence the ghosts. One night, sitting by the fire with what was left of my squad, I asked the gravel-voiced ranger why we kept doing it, why we kept marching into hell, why we kept bleeding for a republic that treated us as tools. He stared into the flames for a long time before answering. Because someone has to. That was it. No speeches about honor, no words about duty or patriotism, just the simple truth. Someone had to. I thought about that for a long time. And maybe he was right. But if that was true, then it meant we weren't legends. We weren't heroes. We were sacrifices, offerings made to keep the Republic moving one more day. And every sacrifice left a mark. I still carry them. The faces, the screams, the weight of Mendez's revolver in my hand. They never leave. They never will. That's the price of glory. Not medals, not songs, just scars, scars and silence. By the time the Mojave campaign had ground its claws into me, I no longer recognized the boy who'd left Shady Sands. Jacob Heller, the farmer's son, the dreamer, the boy who believed in posters and legends. He was gone. What stood in his place was something colder, harder. A silhouette draped in black, a rifle always at the ready, a name whispered more often in fear than in gratitude. That was the burden of being a ranger. On paper, we were heroes. symbols of the Republic's strength, its guardians in the wastes. Settlers clung to that image. Raiders cursed it. Even the legions spat our name like a challenge. But when I looked at myself in the mirror, the rare times I dared remove the mask and stare into my own eyes, I didn't see a hero. I saw a weapon. The code had burned away hesitation. The Mojave had burned away mercy. What was left was efficiency, cold, brutal efficiency. And that's what the Republic wanted. I remember one mission in particular, a caravan massacre near Nelson. Legion had hit hard, slaughtered everyone, or so we thought. When we arrived, we found one survivor, a boy, no older than 12, hiding under the burned wreck of a Brahmin cart. His face was smeared with blood, not all of it his own. His eyes were wide, vacant, too far gone to cry. I knelt beside him, lowered my mask, tried to speak like a man instead of a ranger. "You're safe now," I whispered. But the boy recoiled, crawling back into the wreckage. He didn't see safety in my face. He saw another shadow, another killer in black. That moment haunted me more than the corpses strung up along the road, because it told me the truth I'd been avoiding. We weren't just feared by raiders and legion. We were feared by the very people we swore to protect. And maybe they weren't wrong to fear us. How many times had I executed captives without trial? How many times had I followed the code, putting the mission above lives that might have been saved? How many towns had fallen silent after our investigations? I told myself it was duty, necessity, survival. But to that boy, it was all the same. Death wore many masks, and mine was just another. That's the burden. You carry the Republic's flag, but you also carry its sins. The weight grows heavier the longer you live. I carried ghosts in my duster, their names stitched invisibly into the seams. Holt, Marta, Mendez, Davis, Isaac. Comrades, civilians, enemies, all blurring together into one endless procession of faces. I saw them in dreams. I heard them in silence. I felt them in the recoil of every shot I fired. The veterans told me you either learn to live with it, or it kills you. Some drowned it in drink. Some buried it under the code, convincing themselves it was righteousness. Others, like Davis, sought death in battle. Me? I carried it. Every step, every breath, every shot. I carried it because I didn't know how to put it down. That was the true cost of the duster. Not the weight on your shoulders, but the weight in your soul. Sometimes, when I walked into settlements, I caught my reflection in the eyes of the people. They didn't see Jacob Heller. They didn't even see a man. They saw the Ranger, the legend. And in their awe, their fear, I realized I had become what I once dreamed of. But it wasn't a dream anymore. It was a nightmare. You want to know what it feels like to be both respected and despised? To walk into a room and have men nod in reverence while children hide behind their mothers? To know that your presence means protection, but also death? That was the Ranger's burden. We were protectors and predators, symbols and executioners. I lived by the code because I had to, because the Republic demanded it. But in the quiet moments, the rare moments when I dared peel the mask away, I asked myself if I was protecting the Republic, or if I was simply feeding its hunger. The Republic devours its Rangers. It eats us alive, uses our bones to build its walls, our blood to water its flag. And we let it. Because someone has to. Because if not us, then who? That's what I told myself. That's how I justified it. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't Jacob anymore. I wasn't even a man in the way settlers were. I was a ghost, forged in fire, bound by a code that had hollowed me out. A ranger. And being a ranger wasn't glory. It wasn't honor. It was a burden heavier than any rifle, one you carried until it broke you, or until you died under its weight. Most of us did. The legend of the Rangers lives on. It will live long after I'm gone, long after the Mojave is nothing but dust and bones. Posters will still show men in black dusters standing tall against the desert sky, rifles gleaming, faces hidden behind masks. Settlers will still whisper of Rangers arriving when all hope is lost. Raiders will still curse our name. But the legend is a lie. I've lived it. I've worn the duster, carried the rifle, walked the endless miles of sand. I've seen the crucifixes, the burning caravans, the haunted eyes of comrades too broken to go on. I've pulled the trigger when the code demanded it. I've left men behind because the mission came first. I've stood before children who thought me savior, only to watch their faces twist in fear when they saw the truth behind the mask. That is the reality. The Ranger is not a hero. He is not a savior. He is not even a man. Not really. He is a ghost, hollowed out by war, carrying the weight of a republic that will never carry him in return. The republic will tell you we are its finest, that we fight for freedom, for justice, for safety. And maybe, once upon a time, some of us believed that. I know I did. I believed so fiercely that I left behind a family, a life, a name. I believed until the code burned it out of me, until the Mojave ground it into dust. Now I believe only this. The Republic survives because it devours its Rangers. We are the blood it spills in the dark, the shadows it sends to kill its enemies, the symbols it parades when it needs to look strong. And when we break, because we all break sooner or later, it folds our dusters, polishes our revolvers, and hands them to the next dreamer who thinks he'll be a legend. That is the burden. And it does not end until you do. I've carried it for years now. Carried it across deserts and rivers, through battles and massacres, through nights where the silence was louder than gunfire. I've carried it in the weight of comrades' names I'll never say aloud, in the faces that haunt my sleep. And I know one day, it will break me too. Maybe it'll be a bullet. Maybe it'll be the bottle. Maybe it'll be the silence, the ghosts pressing too close. One way or another, the burden will claim me. But before it does, I want you to hear this truth. If you see a Ranger standing on the horizon, don't mistake him for a hero. Don't believe the posters, the slogans, the myths. That man isn't here to save you. He isn't here to bring light into the dark. He is the dark. He is the ghost the Republic sends when it needs something done that no one else will stomach. And once he's done, he will vanish again into the sands, carrying another ghost on his shoulders. You might thank him. You might fear him. You might never see him again. But you will never know him, because there is nothing left of him to know. I know this because I am that ghost. I was Jacob Heller once, a farm boy who dreamed of becoming a legend. Now I am what the Republic made me, a ranger, a weapon, a shadow. And if you take anything from my words, let it be this warning. Do not envy the Ranger. Do not chase the duster or the mask. Do not dream of being what I have become, because the price is too high. The price is everything. Glory is a lie. Legends are lies. The truth is blood and silence, and a burden that never lifts. When you see us, remember what we are. Not saviors, not heroes. Ghosts. And ghosts are born from graves.